Let's move on now to the AMP Planning Generation menu. A few things to note first on where you will find the AMP menus in SAP Business One. We specifically do not call our product MRP because standard SAP Business One already has MRP functionality, but you will find the AMP menus underneath the MRP module. The first thing to point out is that you have Forecasts, MRP Wizard, and Order Recommendations under this module. If you are using our planning, you will not be using the MRP Wizard or the Order Recommendation menu options, as these are a part of the standard SAP Business One product. These will be hidden from the menu in your production database. If you are going to use Forecasts, then of course keep that on the menu. If you don't use them, it's your choice whether you want to keep it on the main modules menu or not. Let's open the AMP Planning Generation menu. At first, you might feel overwhelmed by all the fields and settings on this window, but don't worry because you might be making adjustments to this window in the first couple weeks that you are running your planning generation, but then after that, they are generally set so you won't need to change them anymore, unless your actual business operations change and you need to reflect those changes in planning. The first thing we should look at are your demands. You want to select the boxes next to the demand items that you want MRP to consider in the database to help determine what is required. You might have this set up to consider forecasts from your customers, sales orders, and production components. The next thing to set up on this screen are your supplies. This would be the opposite from your demands. Notice the first checkbox is for safety stock or inventory minimum. Remember earlier that you should only use one of these on your items, and you should be consistent across the entire system. For your supply, you might tell the system to look at your safety stock, purchase orders, and your production orders if you manufacture or kit some of your items. In the purchase order section, we can see some values from the item master. For example, we have the day's supply set to 7. If this day's supply is correct for all of your items, then it will be fine to just set it here. But if you have variation in day's supply by the item warehouse, you're going to need to set those variations for the items at the item warehouse level, as I showed earlier in the video. The system will always prioritize the value set for the item over the value set here. Expedite Days is a common MRP term, and in our AMP planning it means the number of days a purchase order line can be late before an exception message is generated telling you to expedite the purchase order line. So for example, let's say this is set to 5 days. If the purchase order line has the item set to arrive on August 1st, but you really need it here on July 25th, which is outside of that 5-day allowance, the system will tell you to expedite the purchase order line. Delay days are just the opposite. These are the number of days that the system will allow a purchase order line to be early, before it gives you an exception message that says to delay the purchase order line. Use SAP Calendar will use a screen in SAP Business One called the Holiday Calendar, which someone with administrative access in your system can use to define the holidays for the year for your company and whether you commonly work weekends and things of that nature. If this is checked, planning will consider this calendar. Combined quantity for discounts when checked will combine and apply volume discount pricing to multiple selected recommendation lines for the same item. Let's bring up our day supply example again, but this time let's say the system is telling us to get 10 of an item here on July 1st and 10 on August 1st. Let's also assume we have quantity breaks set up in our volume discount window for a business partner for that particular item, like we see here for our business partner Far East Imports. If the combined quantity for discounts checkbox is selected, the price that would be used on a purchase order would be the discounted price for our quantity break of 20 items. The behavior for this checkbox cannot be configured on a vendor-by-vendor basis, but rather will be turned on system-wide if checked. But in our experience at LBSi, as trusted advisors, most vendors will be okay with combining purchase order line items for quantity discounts. In the production order section, you can see we have the day's supply, expedite days, and delay days, just like in the purchase order section. These fields function exactly the same way as in the purchase order section. The only difference is that these are separated out to look at production order dates rather than purchase order dates. Usually your values in these fields are larger because you have more control over your production order process than your purchase orders process. Supply type has 3 options: released, planned, and all. Very few of our clients use this on planned production orders, but it entirely depends on you. If your planned production orders are always valid, then you might want to do this for all so that you are looking at planned and released. To help you understand this, it is helpful to know that anytime a user creates a production order in SAP Business One, it automatically adds into the system in planned status. It has to be changed to release status by someone before you can issue components and report completion to the order. A lot of times you might add production orders into the system in planned status just to figure out the cost of producing the item. In this case, you would not want to consider your planned production orders since you aren't actually intending to release that production order. Use SAP Calendar works exactly as it does on the purchasing side. The Set Component Available checkbox should always be checked. This displays the date that components on production orders are available to start a production order. Component due date determines when the component items are due based on the following scheduled dates, less the component lead time. Parent date is the production order scheduled start date, parent due is the production order due date, and operation start is the production order row scheduled start date. The planning warehouse section at the bottom literally tells us that planning is considering the warehouses that are listed here. You should be setting up planning to look at any warehouse that has good inventory. For example, you would probably not want to look at a quality hold warehouse. To add a warehouse, right-click on the pound sign and click Add Row. The Plan by Warehouse checkbox determines whether to consider all warehouses together or each warehouse separately. If the box is checked, planning will consider stock, supply, and demand by each warehouse for order recommendations. If this box is left unchecked, then stock, supply, and demand requirements will be consolidated from all of your warehouses when generating order recommendations. If the box is checked when you generate planning, the setting cannot be changed in the future, which is why the checkbox is grayed out as you can see here. The Roundup Planned Supplies checkbox is used only when yield percentage for the item on the item master record and scrap percentage on the bill of material row for an item is used. If checked, the planned supply quantity in the quantity required column on the order recommendation screen will be rounded up to the nearest whole number. If left unchecked, the actual quantity in the quantity required column will be displayed without any rounding. The Update Projected Availability checkbox simply determines whether or not you want to update the projected availability data for planned items after you perform the planning generation. The number of months average to display field allows you to enter the number of months to calculate and display the item's average monthly usage for. The calculation will display complete months only, and it will start with the previous month and go backwards, according to the month you run planning generation. So for example, if you run planning generation in July of 2020, and you set this field to 3 months, the calculations will be displayed for April of 2020 through June of 2020. The calculation is based off of the AR delivery, AR return, AR invoice, AR credit memo, and the production component issues and returns transactions. The order recommendation number days determines the date in the through order by date field on the order recommendation screen. So for example, if today's date is July 1st of 2020, and you set this field to 365, the through order by date field will be set by default to July 1st of 2021. We recommend that you never set this field to a number that is less than your longest lead time item that you purchase or make, because you risk that item not appearing in the order recommendation screen. The Use Safety Stock or Inventory Minimum field simply tells planning which field to use as a demand in planning generation. As discussed in our video on the planning fields found on the item master, you should be using either safety stock or inventory minimum consistently for all of your items and not both. The number that you enter in the transfer order days supply field will determine the number of days that planning should accumulate your planned transfer order request supply quantities required by an item to create one order recommendation. The Allocate Inventory Through Days field is used to determine the number of days into the future that planning should hard allocate or peg inventory supplies to a demand. And the dock to stock lead days are the number of days it takes to stock the material from the date that it comes in from your purchase order, or the days it takes from the date it was completed on a production order to the date it is ready to be consumed. Now let's take a look at the forecast section of the planning generation screen. The first field is the forecast code field. To include forecasts into your planning generation, select a forecast code, which are codes you set up for your forecasts that you built in standard SAP Business One. To exclude forecasts from planning, ensure the blank code is selected like you see here. The consume before days is the number of days in advance of a forecast date that actual sales order demands can consume a forecast quantity. We recommend you set this to 0. And the consume after days is the number of days after a forecast date that actual sales order demand can consume a forecast quantity. We recommend for weekly forecasts that you set this to 6, and for monthly, you set it to 30. In general, you are determining how many days forward or backwards from the forecast date that planning can allow demand from sales orders to consume the quantity demanded in your forecast. The higher the days, the less overstock you will experience in general, all else being equal. The forecast as of date is the beginning date for your consideration of forecast and planning. We recommend you either leave this blank or else enter the first date of the current week or month used in your forecast. The forecast consume by field allows you to select either document or due date to consume your forecast by. The final section of settings on this window is the messages section of the checkboxes used to turn on or off particular exception messages. The supply warehouse demand warehouse message, if checked, will display an exception message if the supply and demand warehouse do not match. The quantity less than order minimum is a message that, if checked, will display an exception message when the quantity order on a purchase order line or production order is less than the minimum order quantity set on the Item Master Planning Data tab. The quantity less than economic order quantity message, if checked, will display an exception message when the quantity order on production orders or purchase order lines is less than the economic order quantity or EOQ on the Item Master. The multiple messages for supply message, if checked, will display multiple exception messages for each supply if the supply is pegged to multiple demands. If it is not checked, then only the first message will display for each supply. Finally, the last generation section will display the user that generated planning last and the start date and end date for that generation. When you are ready to generate planning again, simply click the Generate button at the bottom of the screen. LBSi's Advanced Manufacturing and Material Planning provides the planning generation screen to make reviewing and changing your planning parameters as well as actually generating planning requirements simple to do. Join us in future videos as we break down how LBSi's AMMP module can help you improve your existing SAP Business One planning functionality. Be sure to click the subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new video. As an SAP Gold partner, LBSi can help you take full advantage of everything the system has to offer. To get in contact with us, visit our website at www.lbsi.com and navigate to the contact link. You can also email us at sales@lbsi.com for sales-related inquiries, or SAP support@lbsi.com if you're an existing client in need of support assistance.